how the universe works is that the observer of the reality can now choose what reality begins to manifest. This is the lesson for your species right now. In the absence of a concrete reality, you become the creator of the reality that you want to experience. The more that you can connect with others on a deeper telepathic connection, the faster that the reality will begin to manifest into existence.
Welcome to Changing the Channel with Joe Garner, a show about shifting our individual and collective beliefs on what is possible for the future of humanity. As our understanding of how our reality continues to shift, we are at a point of reunification between science and spirituality. What does the world look like when we break free from the generational trauma that has kept most humans playing small for thousands of years and step into our full power as the co-creators of this reality? I always ask that you keep an open mind with this podcast. Ask yourself what resonates with my truth at this time and what does not. Respect your intuition, but see if you can get through the whole show, because there might be that little nugget buried deep in the conversation that unlocks something for you. Welcome back, everyone, to Changing the Channel. You may remember Dr. Cameron Alldredge from a few months back, where we explored mystical experiences, hypnosis, meditation, and psychedelics. He's a licensed clinical psychologist and a researcher at Baylor University at one of the leading research laboratories on clinical hypnosis. So welcome to the show, Cameron. Thanks for joining me again today.
It's good to be back. Thank you.
Yeah. So in our last conversation, we got into some really cool topics. It was probably one of my most watched videos on YouTube in the past year or so. And I think it struck a nerve. It caught people's excitement about what is the potential of hypnosis, what is meditation, how are those all related, and can there be a non-psychedelic induced state where, you know, you get the benefits of the psychedelics, you get the access to the subconscious mind, you're kind of going, circumventing the reticular activating system, the default mode network, like your standard operating procedures of what you call reality. And I think that was a really cool experience for a lot of people that were listening, watching. They weren't too familiar with those ideas. But we were catching up. We connected a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about this phenomenon, which is typically called channeling. Most people kind of understand it as when they get into a deep, either hypnotic, meditative state. At some point, they can access some part of themselves or something outside of themselves. I don't think the science isn't really there to fully understand it, but they are semi-aware or not aware at all of this communication that kind of happens through their physical body. So you've been doing this with clients. You've been kind of maybe studying a little bit about it. From your perspective, what is this phenomenon? What is happening in the human mind when people are experiencing what is, again, often called channeling?
Yeah, I think there's a couple ways to look at it, because there seems to be, in some sense, there's this access to this wealth of information that seems to be outside of ourselves or our normal perceptions, that's always there, that we can access through these non-ordinary states of consciousness. And I'm trying to find this divide with what are the things that are already kind of inside of us that we're accessing internally, and then at what point does that switch to be more external, or we're tapping into perhaps this ether or this interconnectedness, this collective unconscious, and going beyond ourselves, this external resource. So I haven't quite, this is all very anecdotal, so I haven't quite found where that shift or where that divide happens. But I do know that in these personal experiences I have when working with people and experimenting with this for over a decade, there seems to be this method, or once we've reached that non-ordinary state of consciousness, there is this greater access to either our unconscious or subconscious mind, or more of a collective unconscious that everybody has access to or tied into in some form. So that's initially my thoughts there of like, okay, we're accessing these things that when we're normally in our conscious processing, they're not readily available to us, even though they are there under the surface.
The journey to finding myself started with a shift in how I viewed my health. That is why I am proud to partner with Purium, the transformation company. What if you could support your health with a system designed for today's challenges? Purium is more than a supplement company. It's a solution for regenerative health. Their whole food products include the only clinically proven glyphosate detox, helping you eliminate the toxic buildup caused by modern farming. Pair that with Beyond Organic superfoods and the most efficient source of protein on the planet, and you've got a powerhouse combination to build muscle, improve digestion, and fuel your energy levels, all while promoting deeper sleep. Plus, Purium is mission-driven with planetary health in mind. They're proud to lead the way in a plastic-free movement using biodegradable packaging as much as possible. True health freedom starts here. Experience the power of this regenerative healing system for yourself and witness your own transformation take place. You get 60 days to try it, and if you truly don't feel any benefit, you get fully refunded. I have personally been using the daily Core 4 products and have noticed an increase in my energy and the depth of my sleep. Use the link in the descriptions to get started today and receive at least $50 off your first order over $75.
Yeah, I kind of liken that to like your heart beating. Your body is in control of the heartbeat, but at no point do you have to consciously think about, all right, I need the left ventricle to fire, now the bottom right, and that would be crazy. So again, these like processes that are happening all the time, that we have access to, they're just kind of happening in that background. And I think like intuition, for me, that what that seems like is a quick glimpse into that deeper knowledge, that deeper wisdom, like a very conscious awareness of that deep knowledge of what is true, what is possible. And the more that we can kind of tune into that intuition, or the more that we're accessing this stream of information from, the quantum field, that seems to be where we are with quantum mechanics, quantum physics, that there is this fundamental building block, this field of energy that exists, and everything kind of manifests out of that field. And if you can, we're always connected to it, but when we're in this this physical realm, when we're subject to only 0.5% of all the information that's flowing into our body, we don't have any awareness of that field around you. So I'm wondering, if that's kind of what you're thinking as well.
Totally. And we know that there's this filtration function that the brain serves where it's filtering, and that filter, works great, keeps us healthy and sane and able to focus on what matters for survival. But sometimes that filtration, it's going to filter out things that could potentially be helpful for us, or things that are available that if we tap into them could bring us better understanding of ourselves or the universe. So one thing too that you've mentioned that reminded me, so we published a paper recently in the past couple of years about a new theory of hypnosis and conscious processing, where we talk about how our brain and our mind has two systems of processing information. We call it the rational system and the experiential system. And you can think of it respectively as like conscious mind, subconscious mind, but we use the rational system to illustrate this idea that we have this part of our brain that is very logical, analytical. It is very, it uses up a lot of conscious or mental resources and effortful. And then on the flip side, the experiential system is very holistic. It's emotional. It learns and bases its function off of emotion and experience. So we have this divide, and hypnosis is one way among many to help someone shift from a more analytical or rational mode of processing from the rational system over to that more experiential. And that same idea, that kind of when somebody says they have a gut feeling about something or intuition, right? That's not something that's being rationally thought of with like conscious thought. That's just something that is springing up from probably the experiential system that we can tap into and have those little glimpses of in moments of intuition, so, or inspiration. So I think it's really going along nicely with what has been published in the scientific literature.
Are you feeling a little bit stuck? Like you've been doing the work, but you're just not sure what the next steps are? Right now, I'm offering coaching through meditation and intuition to tap into your soul, to get the hints about where your life is heading towards. What are the next steps for you? So if you're interested, check out the show notes and set up a time to just check. I've got a free 30-minute discovery call that you can sign up for. I look forward to hearing from you, and please feel free to reach out.
Yeah, I would love to include that in the show notes if you can send that over after the show.
Yeah, happy to.
That sounds like a fascinating read. And is that kind of similar to, what is it, the level 1 and level 2 processes of thinking? I don't know if you're familiar with that, but
yeah, and
is that kind of similar to that, or is that separate from it?
no, it's that same idea. Like Daniel Kahneman in that book, Thinking Fast and Slow. It's that same kind of. It's just called a dual process theory. That there are these two systems of processing, these two modes, however you want to call it, level 1, level 2. That's another way, and that they're always present, but they work synergistically, even though they are very different.
From your perspective, and just kind of putting you on the spot, like, is there a good balance between those two for like an optimal state of functioning, or is it better to kind of bounce between the rational and then spend some time in the emotional and then come back to the rational and do it that way, or?
Yeah, I think by default, the average person probably spends majority of the time functioning primarily from the rational system, that more analytical, like when they're faced with a problem, that's going to be the system at work. But then it's almost like it requires more of a shift, like a deliberate shift to deliberately or purposefully function more from the experiential system. And so one way to do that, like I talked about, is hypnosis, but I think meditation's another way. Psychoactive substances, like there are methods to experience that shift, but if we don't shift into that on purpose, or we try to orient ourselves more toward the experiential system, I think our default for most people is going to be the rational system.
Right. It's going to pull them back. They're going to be kind of anchored to that rational system.
Yes.
And I would assume it probably also has to do with the neuroplasticity. If they've been in the rational thinking mind, then those neurons have fired together that reinforce this idea of, a concrete existence, that this is that the 5 senses are the only way that we can interpret or interact with the world. And as you break those, whether that is through hypnosis, meditation, psychedelics, whatever that is, that you start to rewire your brain to operate from a little bit more of that emotional level 2, side of the brain. And it's like working out. You got to kind of exercise that ability. So if you want to be that creator, you want to be, the CEO of a company that has all the best ideas, solutions to problems, these kind of things, you've got to spend a lot of time in that emotional side, that tuning into that, that gut feeling, that intuition. And I think, there's plenty of people. Steve Jobs is one that comes to mind, who put a lot of emphasis on he didn't come up with ideas through his rational brain. They almost like came to him, whether it was through dreams or a feeling or being able to meditate. He was big into meditation.
Mm-hmm.
That he was able to make those connections, make those leaps, help solve the problems that he was being brought to when they were developing all the different products that they were coming up with. These revolutionary products that people didn't even know that they need. When they came with the iPhone, nobody wanted to buy the iPhone. They were like, why would we put music and our cell phone together into one thing? And he was like, it's way, way, way more than that. Just see. And by the second iteration of it, he had 30% of the US market on his phone. So pretty incredible to see how that process works when you can tune into that second layer, that emotional side. From my perspective, you can almost see into the future. You can see maybe even access different parts of this like linearity of time to be able to make legitimately the best decision that you could possibly make with all the information that is available to you through, your physical body.
Yeah, and I think that's summed up nicely with one of those early mottos associated with Apple, which is "Think different." That's what you got to
Right.
do. Think different. So,
Right.
yep.
Get out of that cognitive brain, get into the emotional brain. So I love
Yes.
that. Well, we, the goal of this show is to get me into that emotional brain side, get me into a meditative state, hypnotized state, whatever that might be, and just kind of see what comes through, what information is available. So it'd be cool to, while we're on the air, maybe come up with a couple questions that we want to ask this intelligence, this aspect of me that whether it's me or again outside of me, wherever that invisible wall is drawn, we'll kind of, maybe we'll be able to flesh that out. Maybe we'll be able to ask that question even.
Yeah, and I think if it's helpful, and you can tell me your thoughts on this, to give a little background of what folks are about to witness, and just kind of emphasize this idea that what's about to unfold, we actually have no idea what's going to come out, what's going to be said, and so that we're going to guide it with questions that we're going to come up with here on the spot here. But would it be okay to give a little bit of a preface then of what people are about to witness here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sweet. So this is something that has just fallen into my lap probably when I was about 17 years old. I was really big into hypnosis still, even in high school, and I began to, instead of just feeding hypnotic suggestions to people, I tried just listening, like getting into that non-ordinary state of consciousness, or helping them kind of facilitate that for them, and then just saying what happened spontaneously. And I was struck once at the age of 17 when, in that state, someone just started speaking. And what was really weird about it is they were speaking in the third person. So they were talking about themselves using their own name and the pronouns to speak about themselves as if somebody else was speaking, but they were speaking about them. It's coming through them about themselves. So that was, as a young 17-year-old, a little spooky. And so I was like, I don't know what's happening here. And what struck me even more is that they didn't remember anything that was said when they woke up, or when they, re-alerted to normal consciousness. So I, very confused, like, okay, whatever this is that I'm speaking with seems to have a wealth of information, and can speak freely when I ask these questions, and can sometimes, feel forbidden to answer certain questions. They'll say, I can't answer that. And so I didn't know what to make of it. But after it happening on many occasions across different people, and it seemed like there was this seamless continuation across different folks, finally brought myself to be more curious and explore, okay, what is this? Who is this? Who am I speaking to? And the answer that came through was, at least what they've told me, is they call themselves the intelligences. That's what they say. That's how they identify themselves to me. But I know that others have called them, the masters or parts or ego states. There are different ways, I think, to describe the same construct, but there's these parts of our subconscious mind or our spirit, however you want to talk about it, that we can focus in on, that have their own unique identities, memories, ways of functioning, ways of interacting with others, and this broader system of who we are. And we can isolate those on an individual level and speak to them when people are in these non-ordinary states of consciousness. And so I've been doing that since I was 17 and am baffled, even with zero or absolute minimal prompting, helping guide someone into this non-ordinary state of consciousness and just kind of being like, hey, who's in there? Anybody want to talk? And how consistent it is with the results that I get there. And so there's a lot of therapeutic application there. We can talk about that maybe another time too, but that's just kind of the introduction for what folks are about to see, is that I will guide you into this non-ordinary state of consciousness. It's going to look like a hypnotic induction, and then give encouragement or prompting for these, I don't know what to call them, entities or things that are already inside of you, or perhaps they're connected to, broader collective unconsciousness. I don't know. Or collective consciousness, to see what they have to say. So now we can talk about questions.
Yeah.
I don't know if there are any that come to your mind. I'll try to think of some now, but happy to hear your input.
Yeah, one that comes to mind would be, can they describe what is happening while we're in this state? Like, what is this connection? Is this a part of me? Is this a part of my subconscious? Is this a part of an intelligence outside of me? And I wonder if they could put it into terms, if they're capable of understanding it from a human perspective. I've been watching people channel information for years now, and there's always this idea that it's coming from the outside, and they're kind of taking over, as if there's you've got a portable speaker, and normally it's connected to Joe's phone, but now it's connected to this other person's phone, and they're playing the music through this speaker. That's kind of how it seems to represent itself. So I'm curious if they can describe what is happening. Is this like a byproduct of, I don't know, the interconnectedness of everything in the universe, or is this just a technology that they've been able to master?
I'm
It'd be
taking notes.
interesting.
This is great. Okay. I like it. Yeah. I'm thinking of another, or yeah, I have another question then of what good does this do for us? Like what's the, so what, basically, like how can this be helpful?
Right. Is this beneficial? Is this just a party trick? Like, what are we doing here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that. I know when we did it earlier, Cameron and I did like a test run a couple weeks ago. And what also came through was this like overarching idea of what was happening on the planet, how things were kind of maneuvering, and it was very appreciative of the work that you did. So obviously it has some familiarity with who you are, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Nice.
And yeah, I think that would be, maybe we just say, what's happening on the planet now, and we can kind of have a quick little talk with that as well.
And kind of piggybacking off that, seeing if there's any words of wisdom or voices of warning or something that perhaps listeners would benefit from hearing.
Yeah, I think that'd be good.
Okay.
And then, yeah, we can kind of see where it goes. Again, from what I remember, I have, when I had it, and we can talk about this when I get out, but like when we did it the last time, I was semi-conscious. Like I was pretty aware of the things that I was saying. If I look back, I couldn't necessarily tell like what the conversation was from like a linear perspective, but I could tell that there was something that was moving through me. I was communicating, I was talking, and yeah, it's very interesting that you've had some people that don't remember anything, and then there's people, that maybe remember. And I remember I read a little bit of Dolores Cannon, and this is kind of a part of her protocol, the QHHT protocol, quantum healing hypnosis technology or something along those lines. And she had the same experience. Some people would go completely out and all of a sudden they would just be taken over. And then other people would be fully aware, almost as if you're having a conversation with them, but you're communicating with something else. She even got into some stories where she was talking with Nostradamus about the future. And, he was obviously this like famous prophet, way seer, future seer kind of person. So, maybe this is that connection to the past, that, instead of it being what people consider God or the universe when they're talking to prophets, it's actually, something, an intelligence from the future or from a parallel universe, something along those lines. So
Possibilities are endless.
yeah, it is fascinating. So yeah, anything else before we get into it?
I'll mention that folks at home can follow along as much or as little as they want. This will be probably a pretty brief, well, I'll go somewhere in moderate range, level of induction. I know that you, Joe, are fairly familiar with this state of consciousness that we're going to try to reach, and that you do your own good meditation practice. So I can draw from that. So I don't have to give you as much suggestion or instruction for that. But for people following at home, just as long as you ensure that you are in a place where you are safe, not operating any kind of vehicles or machinery, and that you're in a place where you can lie down and not be interrupted, that's great. But you can also just listen with appreciation what's going on, not necessarily following along for yourself. But I'll give those basic instructions and suggestions as we go, and then we'll see what comes up today. So
Yeah, just to reiterate, make sure if you are following along at home, like you said, you're laying down. You don't want to be sitting up. If you're not familiar with meditation, it's always recommended as you're getting into the meditative state that you're in a safe place, that you can't fall forward if you do end up, losing consciousness. And obviously if you're operating any type of machinery, vehicle, you're operating anything that requires your attention, that you do not get into this state, maybe turn it down for a moment and then come back in, just to be sure.
bingo. Okay. We ready to start?
Yeah. Let me grab a drink real quick.
Yeah, go for it. Excellent. Well, I'll invite you just to start by settling it in, slowly exhaling, good. And just start to slow down your breathing, allowing more time to pass with each breath in and each breath back out whenever it feels good for you. Just slowly easing into a comfortable state of peaceful relaxation. Noticing that the more you relax, the better you feel, and the better you feel, the more you can relax. It's as if a warm wave of relaxation starts at the top of your head and flows gently down through your body to the tips of your fingers and to the tips of your toes. Every part of your body feeling limp, loose, and relaxed. Feeling as if you are sinking down into the chair, but at the same time, the body feeling light and weightless. Letting go, surrendering yourself to that deep and peaceful relaxation, noticing how nice it feels to be there. Just relaxing, letting go, deeper and deeper down. Every word I say helps you to relax. Every sound you hear relaxes you. Your mind and body know exactly what to do and where to take you to help you experience this wonderful state of consciousness and relaxation that will allow you to have the experience that you desire. Continuing to let go, find yourself there. In a moment, I will count from 3 down to 1. With each number I count, just letting yourself relax even more. Drifting deeper and deeper down, deeper relaxed. You're doing great. Starting with the number 3, deeper down, letting go. Every muscle is relaxed. 2, even deeper relaxed. The mind and body are still and at peace. Just thinking for a moment what it might be like to completely let go and relax as much as you can when I say that next number. And 1, as deeply relaxed as you'd like to be. The body feels as if it's floating, and you feel wonderful from head to toe. You're doing fantastic. I'd like you to start to orient your mind to being open and receptive to whatever influences or messages might come through. Noticing that you can vocalize these different messages and inspirations as they come through without any effort, that it seems to flow through you effortlessly, easily, where you can say and vocalize whatever comes to mind, and it's almost as if your body moves for you and makes the sounds necessary to form the words of whatever comes to mind. You're able to speak clearly and audibly to a point where I can hear and interpret the messages that you say. What I'd like you to do is begin to find yourself in a conference room. The conference room can look however you'd like it to look. There's a large conference table in the middle of it. You can see what that looks like. There are chairs on either side of it, and there's a chair at the head of the table. You can start to see what this conference room looks like as you continue to relax and let go. And what I'd like to invite you to do is find your seat at the head of the table. And you can sit in that chair and notice how comfortable and relaxing it is. Noticing that you can continue to relax. You see the chairs empty, lining either side of the table. And in just a moment, you'll be able to invite the different parts of your subconscious mind, the intelligences, the masters, however they'd like to identify themselves. They can begin to enter into this conference room with you. And you can notice that sense of warmth and greeting and connection that you have with them as they enter into the room. And you can notice which ones are sitting close to you, which ones are perhaps further down the table. And maybe there are some that choose not to sit at the table, and that's okay too. And what I'd like to do is focus first on one, potentially with the name Truth. One with the name Truth. And if that part or that intelligence, if truth can speak, go ahead and respond by saying your name.
Hello. This is how you would call truth.
Wonderful. Truth, you're typically my access point and how I like to start. And the first individual I like to contact and make contact with. I'm curious if at the onset here today, if there's anything we should be aware of, we should focus on, or any words of advice as we begin.
This is exciting for us to be able to broadcast this experience to others. It's not always we get to share what is happening with so many people. This experience is what you may refer to as conscious communication. And we are always excited to communicate with you and the guests you allow us to come through.
Wonderful. I appreciate that. I'm curious, Truth, if there is someone or a name who we should try to speak with regarding some of these questions that we have predetermined. If that person is you or that individual is you, fantastic. Or if you have any ideas on someone, I'm glad to hear that as well.
For the ease of this vessel, I will continue to talk, but I'm in communion with those that are around. I will interpret for them, as some of them may not fully understand the language, the human experience as I do.
And why is it that you have a better understanding of that human experience?
In my lineage of lifetimes, I have been a human more than many.
Can you begin by giving us some insight into what is actually happening right now, the process and what is actually going on, and framing it in a way that we can understand?
In your current understanding, what is happening is called telepathy. It is the direct communication between consciousnesses that exists everywhere in the universe, where one specialized consciousness can speak to another specialized consciousness through the fabric of your universe, of the universe. It can instantaneously communicate, transfer information from one side of the universe to the other, or from one room to the next. And it's with this telepathic communication that we can communicate with you in your time and space that you exist in. And it's important for us to share that this telepathic ability is available to anyone. As you discussed earlier, it is a connection in the brain. There's a part of the brain that allows this telekinetic communication to happen, to exist, to be aware of. And it is the belief and the practiced ability of the operator to be able to use this telecommunication.
I know that I personally, and this is based on my own experience, have referred to you and others as intelligences. And I'm curious if that's an accurate perception or where that even comes from and what insight you have about that.
As your world, your species is beginning to learn the fundamental building blocks of reality, is information, is intelligence. Information is the blocks that it is built upon. Intelligence is the use of those blocks in a way to further your species, to further your development as a part of the whole that exists. So from our perspective, what intelligence is the ability to use the building blocks of the universe in a way that allows us to continue to evolve. We are not how you would call physical beings anymore. We are an essence that exists outside of physicality, but has an ability to work with those building blocks of the universe in a way where we can see through time, through space, and guide others as they journey through this experience of reality. So to help you, and we do this we have this understanding of intelligence to not confuse your history. This communication with intelligence has been on your planet for millions of years. But in this iteration of your species, it has been shaped into an understanding that it is something outside of yourself. In the religious text, they speak of prophets communing with God and wayseers with the ability to see into the future, into the past. And that has clouded your judgment. It has given the false belief that only a chosen few are capable of communicating with this intelligence, with the intelligence that exists as us. So we are careful to share exactly what we are, as to not confuse or alter anyone's understanding.
And following up then, so are you personally something or an entity that is a part of Joe, or are you external?
It may not make total sense to you, but both answers are yes. Although Joe would be considered an individual, his intelligence is connected to every other intelligence in the universe, just as your intelligence and anyone else that exists is connected to the intelligence of everything else. So although we do not share experiences from his perspective, we are innately tied together through what you would call quantum entanglement. The idea that energies, particles that have interacted with each other can remain connected across vast distances and are able to share an experience with each other across the different realms of the universe.
And how can this be helpful for people, or why should we use this or care about it?
Using teachers as guides is always a useful thing as you develop your people. Pay lots of money to work with the best and brightest on your planet. We would say that they have this connection to the higher realms, even though they may not be fully aware of it. So just as those beings have a connection to something higher than themselves, so do we. And as each one of you connects to this intelligence, the one that is closest to you from a, call it, familial connection. You will be guided to the best value, the best outcome that you are capable of having during this incarnation. Instead of walking around with a blindfold on, bumping into different things as you travel through life, you can connect with us for guidance, for information, for a map of how to move forward, how to travel through life. We only offer a map. We do not force you to go down any path. You have free will to choose which direction you go. Just as you can choose to listen to the teachers on your planet. So from our perspective, the benefit is a hastened evolution in your species. An evolution away from the negative outcomes, the existential crises that you have found yourself in.
Can you give us some information or reading or your observations of what's happening on more of a global or planetary scale?
I can share a few ideas, but again, we cannot interfere with free will. But from our perspective, you have these reality bubbles. Different parts of your world experience reality in different ways. And as those bubbles bump up against each other, they begin to form new bubbles, new realities, where your civilization for the first time will have this singular bubble of reality instead of a fractalized, what you might call different countries or regions of your planet. There will be more or less a singular reality, not to say a singular ruler or ruling class, but every piece, every part of the species will have access to the information that every other part of the species has. There will no longer be this gap between those who have knowledge and those who do not. And in this space, you will easily solve any existential crises that may come up. But in the interim, as these bubbles burst, as people's realities begin to almost leave them, the structures that they've built around themselves begin to become translucent or less confining, there will be struggle with those humans. They have existed in this reality of physicality, and that reality is starting to fall away, is starting to dissolve around them. So in this interim period, it may look as if there is chaos and turmoil, and that the human race is moving towards the eventual destruction of itself. That is only the illusion that is held when the structures that those are so familiar with dissolve away from them. So in this space where your reality begins to dissolve, it is important for humans to hold a vision of the future they want to experience. When that structure is gone, how the universe works is that the observer of the reality can now choose what reality begins to manifest. This is the lesson for your species right now. In the absence of a concrete reality, you become the creator of the reality that you want to experience. The more that you can connect with others on a deeper, empathic, telepathic connection, the faster that the reality will begin to manifest into existence around your planet. The more communication, the more conversation, the more you can understand what other humans desire, and the more that can be aligned, the quicker and easier, and we use the word easy in quotations, this process will be. So hopefully that helps you understand what may be happening on your planet as we begin to feel, as you begin to feel this shift in your reality.
As we begin to wind down and close, I'm curious if there's any advice or words of wisdom, warnings, however you want to phrase it, that you want to impart before we finish today.
The key during this time is to focus on what you want more than what is not there. If you can focus your attention on a reality, on a world of communion, community, of equality and abundance, this is the world that will come into reality. If you focus your attention on the dissolution of the old world, you will continue to manifest that old world into existence for the next generation to deal with. So remain focused on the future that you want to experience and let go of the past that has been so familiar to you thus far.
Well, we thank you for your insights and for your presence.
Thank you for having.
I'm curious if I can now speak with dreams. So, dreams, if you can hear me, go ahead and respond by saying your name.
Hello, Cameron. This is Dream.
Dreams, can you do me a favor and wake Joe up or bring him back into normal alert consciousness in the next 5 to 10 seconds?
Of course.
Thank you. Welcome back.
Cool. Oh, I was out there for a little bit. Holy cow. I think, what do we go in at 20?
I don't even remember. Wow.
Whew.
Well, I'd love to get, when you feel fully oriented, just your initial thoughts or impressions on that.
Yeah, always fascinating. It's always interesting to hear what comes through. From my experience, like from a personal experience, and I shared this with you last time, there's this physiological feeling. Like there's a feeling in the heart and then in like in my mouth that I've experienced before in dreams, but never in the physical reality, never like in my waking experience. Um, for me, I'm fairly conscious and aware of what is like the words that I'm saying as I'm saying them. I don't think I couldn't fully piece together everything that we talked about. So it's interesting. It feels like I'm aware and like that I'm semi-conscious, but not. I'm definitely not fully conscious of the conversation that's happening. So, but yeah, some of the themes. These are themes that I've heard before from other people that are channeling this idea of this kind of shift in awareness, shift in consciousness that's happening. Again, that's kind of why I started this show, was I felt that there was this shift that was coming. So, yeah, it always fascinating. I'm excited to go back and listen to what was said and the full conversation, because it's always kind of exciting for me to really hear what was going on.
Sure. Yeah, that is exciting.
What about you? What was your experience?
Yeah, there was a lot of continuity of, I suppose, messages that have been presented before, but a lot of, it seems like there's this evolution of, because some of these questions I've asked since, the age of 17, when this just kind of spontaneously happened. And to see that there's this this thread of continuity, but this evolution on top of that, where it's like, as I've grown and learned more, it seems so has my ability to understand more complex ideas. And so that's kind of neat to experience and to witness that change in how these things are explained to me over time. That there's still, a lot of consistency, but that there's a little bit more complexity added to that because now I can understand it that way.
Yeah, that's been my experience as well. The more I learn about specific topics, about the kind of underpinnings of how reality works, the more information can kind of flow through me. And I can, when I'm in that channeling state or that meditative state, the information that is flowing to me is, uh, um, it's broader. It uses the full understandings that I have to be able to communicate. And I feel like if I was able to learn, everything in the world that this intelligence could speak through me, that kind of intelligent, like everything that I would be aware of, it would be able to comment on, share with, communicate through. And the broader my vocabulary, the broader my understanding of how reality works, the more it can share. And that just, that feels like how the learning experience happens. When you're in high school, you take high school math, like you only understand algebraic calculations. When you get into, advanced calculus and you start working with, matrices and stuff like that, like your mind as a high school student you could have looked at a matrice and said, all right, I'm going to multiply this matrice by this matrice, and your head would have exploded. But as you learn and understand that, you are now capable of understanding more and more and more. And yeah, that's what it feels like for me as well. Like as I develop as a human being, my ability to connect with this continues to develop as well.
Sure. That's likely the natural order of how learning and experience needs to be. So interesting.
Yeah. But yeah, it was interesting to hear that again, like the more that we focus on the reality we want to create, I thought that was pretty profound. That the more we focus on the reality that we want to create versus the reality that maybe we're in or we're experiencing right now or have experienced in the past, that's what will, come into existence more and more and more. And that, that's an ethereal concept, but it's also a pretty, logical concept as well.
Yeah.
The more energy we put into building the reality that we want to create, whether that's money, time, effort, resources, all of that, the more resources we put into a future we want to exist in, and we agree on that future, the better that humanity is going to turn out. And if we disagree on the future of what humanity should be, we'll continue to live in this kind of fractalized world, which, is not conducive to the best outcome. I'm not saying that there's any better or worse outcome necessarily. All outcomes have their lessons and their experiences that are felt from the soul level. But I do think that the more we can come together, the more we can kind of unify our vision of the future, the better that the planet will be.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I like that sentiment. And I'm sitting here thinking, with more of like a scientist, psychologist hat on, like how to reconcile some of these things with what we know currently in science, and where it needs to go to have more wide scale acknowledgement and even adoption. And I don't know that that's something that's going to happen anytime soon, but perhaps it'll reach a point where it's necessary. And I'm curious about that. So yeah, I'm just thinking of, okay, what are the next steps to perhaps bring this to the masses if that's necessary, and what tools are we going to need to use to do that? So it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the more that people can connect with this intelligence, the clearer the vision can be. If we're all learning from a similar intelligence, then that intelligence can portray a future that we can all agree on, because it's operating, from a much higher level. It seems like it's operating from a much higher level than what you or I or even the most intelligent human on the planet could possibly be.
Hmm.
And then it's also interesting to kind of equate AI in this global intelligence. Like,
Hmm.
where does AI play an intermediary role, or does AI play this, like, almost a necessity for us to have this global vision of what future is possible, what is possible in the future.
Hmm.
And then, instead of it just being this tool that helps us, get our jobs done faster, it's like, how can we use it to amass all the information that's available on the planet, and then be able to make calculations, decide what the best outcome is for humanity. And then, yeah, and that scares people for sure. It's like, um, if you don't trust who built or who structured the AI, well, then you're not gonna give it all the information. You're not gonna trust the outcomes, the outputs that it has. There's always that possibility of it not being this pure um, flow of information. But that's where open source is the answer. Like, if you can open source an AI, and not restrict its output or its input, it's just gathering up as much information as possible, then yeah, it does seem, even if you disagree with the answer, it's hard to disagree. It would be like disagreeing with, the PhD, the doctorate when you're a undergrad. It's like, yeah, they probably have a lot more information than you do. Um, and that's how they're coming up with their analysis, their whatever.
Hmm. Yeah. Interesting idea.
So I guess we will see.
I guess we will see.
Yeah, that's how time works, right? You just kind of, it happens and things happen, and you try to stay neutral as best you can. But
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool.
well, is there anything from a clinical perspective that you want to share with us as we kind of wrap up this show? Any messages that you want to share? Anything that you're working on right now?
Yeah, I mean, from a clinical perspective, this is pretty far out and definitely on the fringe, which that's okay. I like to live on the fringe, and that's why I really like this renaissance of psychedelic assisted therapies, or really bridging that gap between spirituality, more metaphysical ideas, with scientific and those types of modalities. So, uh, as far as things that are being worked on, since we did our first interview together, uh, I launched across a few different platforms a social media that's more focused on presenting hypnosis, altered and non-ordinary states of consciousness, psychedelic assisted therapy, those types of topics for folks to check out. I'll send you like the handle that you can include in the show notes, but that is a new project I'm moving into to try to build greater awareness and disseminate this good information. So
Mm,
that's a big thing I'm working on right now.
beautiful. Do you ever have any fear being on the fringe that there's potential for blowback or anything like that? Or
It's a good question. There is a little bit of that trepidation around, what if this discredits, me or my work or what I want to do? And in a sense, I have I have faith that those things will work themselves out. And I when I'm working with patients or doing, evaluations, things like that, it's very, evidence based and things that I do to the best of my ability with the information that we have as a profession. But I think that perhaps it's more of just motivating to get these fringy ideas, if that's what we're going to frame them as, to be more mainstream or perhaps more evidence based, if that's possible. Maybe the very nature of them makes it so that they elude scientific inquiry. But my guess is there's got to be somewhere we can meet in the middle, and that's what I'm excited about.
yeah, I think so as well. I think the development of the quantum, perspective of reality, and, it's happening in so many different um, studies in biology. They've got quantum biology now. In astrophysics, there's quantum physics. Like, these are studies where the most advanced people in the world are studying this, um, what you'd call non-physical aspect of reality. And for that to not apply to every other modality, every other study, seems, it'd be like, gravity applies to science and physics, but it doesn't apply to mathematics or, whatever. It's like, no, these are fundamental rules of our existence. So
Mm-hmm.
as they become more mainstream, I think we continue to shift it everywhere across the board.
Yeah, totally.
So, well, Cameron, this has been a wonderful experience. Thank you again for joining me today. I'll make sure to link any of those, that paper that we talked about in the beginning. If you've got any other papers that you want to share, I've got no problem throwing those in the notes as well. And then, if anybody wants to learn more about hypnosis, the benefits of it, the study of it, definitely follow Cameron along for the ride. So thanks again for coming on, and I'm sure we'll probably do this again sometime in the future.
I would hope so. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course.
Thank you again for listening to Changing the Channel with Joe Garner. If you enjoyed the show, please follow the podcast, hit the bell to know when a new show comes out, share with a friend, and rate us on whatever platform you're tuning in from. It helps get these messages out to more people to create the collective shift in reality we are here to experience. Make sure you interact with the Q&A and poll sections of the show so I can continue to provide content you enjoy. Finally, check out my website in the show notes to become a VIP of Changing the Channel and join the shift that is happening.